Chris Sewall here, baseball card collector, investor, dealer in that order. Welcome everyone. Question and answer time, round 2. Let's jump right in. Started one sent in by Ted, who wrote, what would happen to the vintage card market if the ultramodern card market collapses? Think about it. If the iconic 1952 Mickey Mantle PSA 1 can be found for 25 to 50K now, with ultramodern star rookies RPA 1-of-1s for 50 to 100K or more, what would happen to the mantle if all these hyped rookies fail and subsequently the ultramodern market tanks? My opinion, if this happens, buy the goats and high-end vintage now before their prices hit the stratosphere. It's an interesting thought. I'd be more inclined to sort of think the other way. I don't know that there's a huge connection between the ultramodern market and a vintage market. Like, I don't know that they mirror each other, but I think they do a little bit, and they usually tend to go in the same direction. Like, we've kind of already seen that in the last few years, right? The ultramodern market has really, really plummeted, really dropped, and the vintage market has come down as well. Nowhere near to the level of the ultramodern market, but yeah, it's sort of followed it down a little bit, I guess would be one way to think of it. So I would sort of think it's more, that would be more the trend would be my guess, is if the ultramodern market continues to fall and, plummets or whatever you want to call it, the vintage market would sort of follow suit and continue to come down a little bit. Next one is sent by Thomas, who wrote, I want to start expanding my vintage PC investments and had a question about grading. I know the vintage basics are buy graded over raw and buy the highest grade one can afford, but it's the point where it actually doesn't make sense to purchase a mid-grade card. 9s and 10s are just about always going to do well, but what about 5s, 6s, and 7s? Right now I'm focused on Cleveland Indians Hall of Famers, so Bob Feller, Larry Doby early win cards from the 50s. I definitely want graded cards, all sorts of reasons those cards are in demand, even in lower grades. But then I looked at stuff from the 70s like Gaylord Perry, and the value just doesn't seem to be there. I understand Feller and Perry in the 50s versus 70s are not apples to apples, but is it worth buying mid-grade Gaylord Perry cards? If PSA is charging $25 to grade a card, the card needs to be selling for a bit more than that to warrant purchasing a graded version. I found very clean raw Perry cards for under $10 from reputable sellers that I could always grade down the road. Don't know if I've got good rules there or am I totally off base. I would like to know if there are any guidelines you have when buying vintage. So that's a really complex question that would take a long time to sort of answer properly. But in short, it very much depends on if you're approaching it from a collector standpoint or an investment standpoint. Those are two very different things, and there can be some overlap, but often there's not. Which what it sounds like you're collecting is a very cool collection. Your favorite players. I don't know what you're trying to do. Want each of their cards and the best grade you can. I'm not sure, but that sounds like a very cool collection. And would I say a 70s Gaylord Perry in mid grade is a good investment card, or 50s early win mid grade is a good investment card? No, but historically that sort of stuff hasn't really gone up much, but also historically that stuff hasn't really gone down much. I mean, vintage Hall of Famers, graded, mid-grade, this stuff has never really tanked or gone down. I mean, you're sort of covered in that direction, and I like to think in terms of what's the downside more so than what's the upside. And so I think that's a great thing to collect if you're also concerned about future values. If you're asking purely about investment, it's a totally different question. Super high grade, if you're talking about a player like Gaylord Perry, unless you get into their rookies, then you can sort of be in the mid-grade level or above to be what I would call a good investment card. Next question was sent by GRWMZ Days. I recently was coaching my last year of Little League. My son is in AAA, second level of minor leagues in Little League. My wife has been league president for the past 4 years. We coached our 2 daughters through softball for many years, and after this year, we are parting ways. Personally, I've invested over 20 years in Little League. Every year was well spent. This past year, the league was offered free packs of Retail Series 1 Topps baseball from Topps themselves. Luckily, I got to open a few packs and got addicted. I have since bought a box of Hobby 2023 Topps and a box of Jumbo of the same. So I have a few questions. What do I do with all the base cards? 2, what do I do with all the rookies? And 3, what do I do with all the parallels? Lastly, Shohei Ohtani is Ken Griffey Jr. of this age, and I decided to buy one. I won an eBay auction and I have questions. I want a Shohei Ohtani 2018 Diamond Kings pitching no pinstripes rookie, but graded a PSA 10. It's a Pop 1. What do I do from here? I think I overpaid, but that's fine. Is it here? Does it have potential? Very cool to hear about your coaching career, and congrats on your son there. I get asked questions like this a lot, and there's not something that I can tell you what to do. I mean, there's lots of answers that make sense, but it has nothing to do with my opinion. It has to do with what do you want out of the cards? Do you enjoy them? If you enjoy them, keep them and pull them out every once in a while and play with them and sort them or whatever. If you're sick of them and they're just taking up space, maybe donate them to kids. It sounds like you have a lot of outlets to kids who would really, really enjoy them. And if you think they're worth a lot of money and, maybe you can sell them and you're willing to put in the time, you can go ahead and sell them. All those answers make perfect sense, and it has nothing to do with what's the right answer. It has to do with everything with what do you want to get out of them? What's the value of them to you? And same thing with the Otani. I mean, you just bought a cool Shohei Otani card, so pop one sounds like a cool card. What do you do from here? I mean, what would you like to do with it? Do you want to keep it, hold it, and remember it, or do you want to sell it and get the money back, or do you want to give it to your kid, or any of these answers make perfect sense. This was sent by Peter, who wrote, I went to the National on Sunday and brought with me 2 small grading submissions of fewer than 10 cards each, one for PSA and one for SGC. I stopped at SGC first. I've made a submission with PSA at a card show, and what I noticed right away about SGC booth was that it was much calmer and more organized. The SGC attendant told me that the camera was recording him as he sorted through my cards. He immediately entered the cards in the SGC system and printed out a receipt on the spot. It was incredibly fast, efficient, and a secure process. By contrast, the PSA booth was insane. I understand that they received thousands more submissions than SGC, but the hectic atmosphere didn't give me peace of mind at all. The PSA attendant took a while making a bunch of marks on my submission forms and finally handed one back to me saying that was my receipt. She explained that it might take up to 3 weeks for the cards just to be entered into the system, and only then would the 65-day clock start for the return. The SGC on-site submission price was $15 per card. The cards were immediately entered into their system, and I got them back in about 2 weeks. The PSA submission was normal $25 per card. I won't be sure when my cards are for about 2 to 3 weeks, and then I'll still won't get them back for almost 3 months. There's a good chance I'll have my SGC submission back before PSA even acknowledges on their website that the cards are in their possession. As I walked away from the PSA booth, I regretted not submitting everything to SGC, regardless of sale price. SGC may have made a new customer of me last week. I wonder how much longer PSA can stand on top with what appears to be an increasingly sloppy customer service and inconsistent grading. Yeah, that's interesting experience. I mean, not really surprising, given what we know about these two companies recently, but, PSA is the behemoth of the industry, for better or for worse. They have the highest resale value, but if you're not super focused in on resale value, these other companies have a lot to offer. And what you said here, SGC is a great example. I mean, rapid, fast turnaround time. They're much cheaper, depending on if you like the look of their slab. I mean, great customer service. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, if you're just looking to get a card in a holder for your PC, I mean, SGC makes a lot more sense on a lot of levels than PSA, for example. And I don't know if that's going to, in the long run, contribute to them getting a larger market share. Or some of the other smaller companies, carving into PSA's market share. I certainly hope that happens. I think PSA is kind of too big at this point. And I'd like to see some of the other companies eat away at the market share. I don't know if that'll happen, but I guess I hope so. And yeah, it makes sense to me that would start to happen based on, your experience, which I don't think is a particularly unique one. This was sent by Thomas, who wrote, is a really nice patch on a bad or average player card worth buying? Yeah, so I mean, sort of like what I said earlier, that's not for me to tell somebody, what you like, but if you like a card of a mediocre player with a great patch, yeah, that no reason not to buy that, especially if you collect the team. And I actually know a lot of people who collect teams, and they focus in on really nice patches that highlight their team's uniform, and they don't really care so much about the player. And I remember having, this was in, I don't know, the early 2000s, so 20-ish years ago. I think it was a Brady Anderson. I don't even remember the card, but I just remember that I was a big Orioles fan, and I think it was a Brady Anderson patch, and it had a piece of the Baltimore Oriole logo, and it looked so cool. And I mean, Brady Anderson was a common at that point, but I really liked that card. Yeah, nothing wrong with that if that's your jam. This one was sent by ZT Laker, who wrote, what is your opinion on cards with celebrities in the background from an investment standpoint? For example, the Mark Jackson card with the Menendez brothers in the background is an incredibly iconic card, but due to its print runs, you can't really invest in those. A card that I found particularly interesting to me is the 2016 donruss optic Paul George All-Star card. In the background, you can see Drake and even see the orange of Spike Lee's glasses. Do you think this card has the opportunity to grow in value like Jean Morant, Young Dolph? So historically, those kind of cards, have not really gone up in value long term, significant growth over time. And whenever I'm sort of trying to predict the future or predict, or target cards that I think are likely to be worth a lot more down the road, I always look to historical data more than anything else. And so those kind of cards would not be sort of on my radar, but it doesn't mean they won't go up, or they may. There may be some event that drives them up, or who knows. But it wouldn't be something that I would sort of look to and target for that. This was sent by Mo, who wrote, what would be the reason behind a buyer paying double or triple the amount of a card for a sale from Greg Morris versus an individual selling the same exact card in the same exact condition? I've noticed this in the small amount of time I've been selling cards on eBay. Could it be the buyers are not doing their homework and looking for all other cards available on eBay, or they would rather spend the extra money knowing the card they are buying is coming from a reputable source? All that said, the price difference is still enormous. Yeah, so you'll see this a lot on eBay, particularly with raw vintage, and Greg Morris definitely, and there's other companies out there as well. who will sort of get higher prices for their raw vintage than other sellers. And this is because uh, most people in the hobby, most sellers on eBay don't know how to properly grade raw vintage cards. It's a complicated thing. You know, it's harder than it looks. It takes a lot of experience. Most people don't know how to do it, and most people overgrade their raw vintage. You know, they'll say a card's X mint and it's really VGX, and you know, experienced buyers know this. You know, if you just buy a raw vintage card from a random seller, there's a decent chance it's going to come back not in the grade they stated. You know, you're going to have to deal with that or return it or whatever. It's a hassle. Whereas if you buy it from Greg Morris or one of the the other major companies with a lot of experience, they know that it's going to be the grade that they get, and they're willing to pay more for this guarantee. In a very similar way that people are willing to pay more for cards that are in graded holders, because it sort of comes with a guarantee for the most part that this card is the grade that's listed there. You're not buying an X Mint card and getting a VGX card, and so that's what's going on there. A collector's dream asked, other than your Ripkin collection, what other vintage players and or cards do you have in your personal collection? Any pre-war cards? Oh yeah, so my personal collection is only about 300 cards, maybe of which, I don't know, a quarter of them are Ripkins. The rest is mainly Hall of Fame rookie cards. It's always been something I really liked. And then some stuff that's sort of scattered from other random stuff, some cards from my childhood, and a couple autographs I got in person, and a couple like random Star Wars stuff and things like that. But mainly Hall of Fame rookie cards is my PC, other than the Ripkins, and yeah, it includes some pre-war stuff, quite a bit of pre-war stuff actually. This one's sent in by Daniel, who wrote, I've been buying Derek Jeter 1992 Kalamazoo High School Emerald cards, supposedly only 2,500 made for each year, but can't find any graded. I have over 200 Emerald, 50 Sapphire, and 20 Ruby. Would PSA grade these, as I haven't seen any? So I'm not actually familiar with this card nor this set, but I did some quick research on it. None of the major grading companies accept this card. PSA, Beckett, SGC, CGC, none of them take this card, nor does COMC, which really just suggests that this card was made by somebody without permission, probably made long after 1992, and is just sort of not a legitimately recognized card within the hobby, unfortunately. I also would have a hard time believing there's only 2,500 of them, given that there was recently some large lots, like a 30 count lot of it sold on eBay just a couple weeks ago. You wouldn't see a 30 count lot of a card numbered to 2,500 from 1992. That's very very unlikely. I mean, because this is possible, but more likely this was made by somebody without permission long after 1992, and they made a lot more than 2,500 of them, and it really, it's really sort of a fake unlicensed card, unfortunately. I should say here that, I don't know that for sure, but that's sort of my guess based on what I see. This was sent by Ron, who wrote, I have a complete 1996 Metal Universe basketball set, 132 cards. All the cards are in really great shape, 9s, possibly some 10s. It's one of my favorite sets of all time, and I was wondering if I should get the whole set graded. I prefer SGC over PSA and Beckett, just my preference, so I know the value if I used them wouldn't be as high as PSA. If I got the whole set graded, it would cost around $2,000 for all the cards with the shipping. Would you do this? I figured the set would be worth more than the $2,000 if they were all graded. The set raw usually sells for around $250 to $300. Even if some of the cards come back an 8 or an 8.5, I still think it would be worth it. What do you think? Would you do this personally? So that's an interesting thought, but I mean, I think realistically, I wouldn't consider doing that for sure personally. Other than a few of the key cards, Jordan and some of the rookies, Kobe and Iverson, you're going to have a hard time recouping your grading fees on an individual card basis. Even a player like Shaquille O'Neal, who's one of the bigger stars in the set, you got to get a 10. Otherwise, if you get a 9 on that card, you're going to be losing. You're not going to be covering your grading fees on the card individually. I don't know what a 9 sells for, but I'm going to guess $10, $15, something like that. A 10 you would do well, but PSA is very, very strict with 10s these days. They don't give out a lot of 10s. So I think on a card by card basis, there's you certainly wouldn't consider that. The commons, the common players, or even like a Larry Johnson or an Allen Houston type player, you're just not going to recoup. 10s you might break even if you get a 10 type of thing. So card by card, no chance. Now the interesting thought is if you had like the whole set graded, what would it sell for? There's no comps on that. So in theory, that could sell real well. I don't know, and I wouldn't guess that it would sell for $2,000, even if it was like say half 9s and half 10s. But I guess I don't know that for sure. This was sent by Esteban, who wrote, I have a moderate collection, nothing too crazy, but I have about 15,000 cards of what I would consider to be bulk, no semi-stars or stars. Just curious on any ideas on what to do with them. I plan to make sure there is no rookie cards or stars in the base cards, but what do I do with the commons? I also have some 70s commons cards, mostly Texas Rangers. Is there a year that you draw the line to keep? I also wanted to ask if you have ever made a deal and gotten such a great deal that possibly found something you felt you wanted to give back to the seller, card karma, or do you feel once a deal's done, it's done? So regarding bulk commons, there's really no efficient way to sell these for any sort of money, unless you're talking about like 70s and back. But if you're talking about 80s to present, there's just not going to be an efficient way to extract any value out of them. I mean, if you had 15,000 commons, you can make like a Facebook posting and maybe you'll get, I don't know, 25, 30 bucks for it or something like that. You can make lots for eBay, fill up flat rate boxes, but I mean, these are not going to sell very quickly and it's not going to be very efficient. So I would generally just recommend donating them to a children's hospital if you don't want them anymore. I've donated many cards to Children's Hospital. They're generally very happy to get them. They can distribute them to kids, and at least they can get some use that way, assuming you no longer want them. For your second question, have I ever bought a collection? It was way better than I thought, and I went back to the seller and gave them a little extra. Yeah, that's happened a few times. It doesn't happen much because I generally try to go through a collection in great detail before I buy it. Like I would want to sort of catch those sort of things before I buy it, as a general rule of thumb. But yeah, it happened a few times before, and I am very much a once a deal's done, it's done type of mentality in both directions. Like if somebody bought something from me and it turned out to be much better than we both thought, I would not expect them to come back to me and give me something extra. But I do that when it's sort of an extreme case, and I think that's sort of a nice thing that we should all kind of do for each other if those sort of situations ever arise, especially in an extreme case. Next one was sent by my man Shane, who wrote, one of your prior videos about Prizm and Kelsey and Taylor Swift's, the Taylor Swift video. I look at cards every day and I notice that very thing, but I don't see it for rookie cards decreasing much for most players. However, after I add one to my PC, I take it off my eBay save searches, so I don't really follow the card prices after I pick up that particular card. I think we think the same way about Ultramodern. I only concentrate on 70s to early 2000s Hall of Famers and a few players that I enjoyed watching them play when I was a kid and teenager. So after saying this, my question is, do you see a downturn on Stars rookie cards sold prices? So I'm not 100% sure I understand your question. I think what you're asking is, are the rookie cards of established players sort of the safest place to park your hobby dollars, if you will? And if that's the question, I would say yes. Historically, the rookie cards of established players, the more established and the better the player, the better. Those are the cards with the least downside. Those are the cards that have done the best long term as a general rule. And I don't really see a reason for that to not continue into the future. Next one was sent by John, who wrote, I enjoy trying to find undervalued oddball cards and grading them to resell. Some of these are oversized, like the 1986 McDonald's Jerry Rice rookie or the 2004 Pro Core X Games Shaun White. These cards are not extremely oversized like a large photo, but the cheapest price PSA will grade them for is $40, which is questionable to try to, given the potential resale value. Do you have any experience grading oversized cards or any tips? It's very cool. I like doing that as well. Oddball cards with very, very low pop counts, sort of low supply, low demand, but that there is some demand on them. And I like the potential with that. But oversized cards, I tend not to do much with. I don't know that I have any tips to give you. They're annoying for a couple reasons. One, the companies charge more. Two, they take up a lot of space. And three, they're just a lot less collected in general, so they're sort of harder to sell. So I don't do a lot with the oversized cards, but I do like the oddball cards like you mentioned. This is sent by Scott, who wrote, one purchase and sell strategy I've always liked is the seasonal strategy, buying players and sports at a season and selling players or sports just before the start of the season. But my question is about whether or not you think this strategy extends to retired players by extension. If I'm looking to target a Dan Marino rookie, for example, does it really matter when what season we're in? Any prices for a card like that impacted by seasonality to any degree? You could extend this all the way back. More vintage players as well. I'm looking to buy a Nolan Ryan rookie. Does it matter if we're in baseball season or not? Perhaps there's an impact, but it just diminishes the farther you go back. If you were trying to sell cards like this, would seasonality even be a factor for you? So in short, no. I don't think a Dan Marino rookie or a Nolan Ryan rookie is going to be impacted in any way by the season. Like the Nolan Ryan's not going to sell for more during baseball season, or there may be other things regarding seasons, like if there's a Nolan Ryan documentary coming out, or if Dan Marino is just about to make the Hall of Fame or whatever. Like there may be things like that, but regarding the sports season, no, I would say retired players basically aren't impacted by the season. It's really only active players where you see that much. At least that's my experience. Next question was sent in by Edmund, who wrote, how do you decide how much you invest back into cards and how much to pay yourself? Do you have a set salary or will it vary month to month? So I do not have a set salary. It varies month to month, and that's just the way I've structured it. For the most part, I just take out however much I need each month, and that varies depending on, you know, what life situations are at the moment. But I have a fairly, you know, minimalist is relative, but I have a fairly minimalist lifestyle for my bracket, and you know, I don't spend much money on other things other than cards. I mean, I enjoy a good restaurant, you know. When I travel, I like to travel decently, but otherwise, I basically want to just put all my money back into cards. So each month, I take out however much I need bills-wise to pay, you know, my bills for my family, for my son, and all that. And everything left over basically goes back into cards, unless there's like a very specific, you know, trip this month or something I want to take. But for the most part, I just take out what I need and then put everything else back into the business. Brady Dog asks, I stopped opening boxes and actively collecting selling in 2010. Back then, not much extra value was put on numbered cards unless it was a 101 or a really low numbered auto of a legend. When did numbered cards pick up steam in the collecting world? Yeah, that's a good question. You know, I don't know that there's like one specific moment where they all of a sudden became really important. I'd say it's been sort of a slow, steady, gradual growth over, you know, decades at this point. Serial numbered cards first appeared in the hobby in the 90s, and they've just become little by little more and more important for, you know, 30 years or so now. And I do think there was probably a boom in importance around the pandemic when in the ultramodern era, the last, you know, 3-4 years, as so many cards are being produced and there's just so much excess cards, and there's, you know, just cards everywhere, and then people are looking for cards that are a little more rare, and so serial numbered cards is a great identifier as to, you know, how rare a card is. So I think there's, you know, been an increase in importance put on them in the last few years. This was sent by Michael, who wrote, got back into collecting a little over a year ago. I sell some cards on eBay, but I always hear you talk about having success with COMC, hoodies, and Greg Morris. If I understand correctly, Greg Morris is mostly for vintage, but if I'm wrong, please correct me. My question is, how do you decide what cards go to COMC, what goes to hoodies? Is there one place you prefer to send graded cards? So prior to 2019, when I moved to Europe, I basically did all my sales on eBay. Like essentially 100% of my sales were done on eBay. But when I moved to Europe, I was sort of forced to look into other options because eBay is very limiting from Europe. Shipping costs are very high. Shipping time is very slow. You know, getting my cards to Europe is a hassle. So, you know, I had to look into other options. And I quickly realized there's some consignment companies out there that have a lot to offer. And if you're dealing with a lot of volume, they're great options. Now, they're going to, you know, charge more than you would be charged if you sold them yourself. But this can definitely be worth it if you, like I said, dealing with a lot of volume. And hoodies and Greg Morris were two of the ones I used right out of the gate and really liked. And they're both channel sponsors, but they're channel sponsors because I was using them already. I was fans of theirs, and we sort of already had a relationship going. So COMC to me is just this amazing platform, so superior to eBay for buying and selling singles. Just such a better buying experience and selling experience regarding singles. And there's a lot of other companies I use. You know, 4 Sharp Corners is one I use. I use the PWCC Vault regularly. Some of the other vaults and auction houses, and there's just a lot of great ones out there. And sort of explaining which cards to send to which company would take a really, really long time to dive into deep. But I would, you know, if you're looking to sell cards and you're sort of not sure, I would say give some of these a try, at least the ones I've mentioned here, and see how you like them, and, you know, sort of judge on your own if they're for you or not. And our final question comes from Mike, who wrote, do you think it would be possible to become a local part-time dealer in exclusively T206 cards? That set has become my main focus as far as collecting goes, but dealing in them has been something I've been thinking about more and more about lately. I live in a relatively large city with many card shows. In your experience and opinion, could a successful dealer have such a specific inventory? Is the supply too scarce? Is the demand too niche? Would love to get your thoughts on this. That's an interesting, you know, thought. I would say if you're, looking to do like a part-time thing and just deal a little bit on the side to make a little money, certainly you can do that. You know, I don't know what your goals are in terms of how many hours you want to commit or how much money you want to make, but yeah, you know, the T206 set is a very popular set. There's a lot of collectors of it out there. There's people putting together master sets. There's entire Facebook groups dedicated to nothing but that set. You could definitely do that as a part-time fun thing on the side. If you were, you know, looking to do it more full-time or make a serious, you know, career out of it, or, you know, then I would sort of question why you would want to be so niche. You know, that would be like a car dealer saying, yeah, I'm a car dealer, but I only deal in, you know, 2010 to 2015, you know, Toyota Camrys. It's like, well, you're really limiting yourself, and there's no real need or no real reason to. So if you were, you know, I would sort of question it there. So I would say, yeah, if it's a part-time thing, absolutely go for it. If it's a fun thing, if you're looking to make it more of a career move, I would guess that you would need to broaden yourself more than that. But that's it. Thank you, everyone, for all the great questions. And if anyone feels like I didn't answer your question full, feel free to leave a follow-up in the comments below. Really appreciate it, as always, and see you all again next time. Thanks, everyone.